if the minister was willing, by comparing the group that the immigration officials handled, and they got no rewards for letting somebody in, and that successfully goes back, and compare it to those people who get special minister's permit because of the intervention of the members of parliament. And that way you can establish a quality control to make sure that an inordinate number of people don't get turned down on visas.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. Does the NDP want to respond to that?
To process all of these different types of applications. Certainly there are many people who want to come to this country, and we want to help them out as quickly as we can. As I said in my opening, the NDP will increase resources and increase funding to citizenship and immigration to reduce the huge and unacceptable backlogs in processing all sorts of visa applications. I think that it's a matter of resources. Like I said, I think all of the parties want to have more people in Canada. The question is, what kind of resources are we going to use to do it? And I think the NDP has the solution, as I've outlined there, is an increase in funding and making sure that we get those long lines reduced so that everybody can come.
Thank you. Green Party rep?
Since you were talking about somebody who, I believe you were talking about somebody for whom, who was a professional, right? Recognition of professional credentials may have been an issue as well. I hope we get to talk about that at some point tonight. I think that there's a big problem, something that needs to be fixed in the system on this particular issue, right? There's a discrepancy, the research suggests, between the point system that we award people on account of the credentials they have and then the actual expectations that they have of fulfilling or being rewarded for those points once you actually get here, right? So you get, you know, X number of points for a graduate degree and Y number of points for a postgraduate degree and so on, and that looks as though the perception is that it makes you more qualified, that you'll benefit from greater employment opportunities over on this side, and then a lot of research now is suggesting that that's just not the case, right? So that many immigrants are professional immigrants, people with good credentials, are in a sense being sold a false bill of goods. So that is something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. At the end of this process to come back to the issue of family reunification if you have additional questions. The next issue that we're looking at is Bill C-49. Bill C-49, just for people that may not be aware, is a bill that resulted from the shipload of refugees that arrived some months ago on the West Coast, and the current government brought forward a bill to deal with human smuggling. That bill basically, and I'm sure I'm not going to do it justice here, but basically it makes it easier for the government to prosecute smugglers. It imposes mandatory minimum prison sentences on convicted smugglers. It holds ship owners and operators to account for use of their ships in human smuggling operations. But it also goes further than that. It also targets, to some degree, the people who are claiming refugee status as well. It will, in fact, prevent those who come to Canada as part of a human smuggling event from applying for permanent resident status for a period of 5 years, should they successfully obtain refugee status. Notice that that is different treatment than if somebody came in here on a plane and claimed refugee status. It also prevents individuals from sponsoring family members for 5 years, and there are other issues around health benefits and the ability. Specifically about the provisions in that bill that would treat smuggled refugees differently than other claimants to Canada. And Andrew, do you want to start?
This really is probably the reason why the Conservative candidates are not here. This is a total bogus issue. The government has been trying to create a hysteria around it. Make no mistake, we got about 500 refugee claimants a week in this country every week. You know, so that's how you get to your 25,000 figure that you ultimately end up with. The government has been trying to create a hysteria, to misinform Canadians, to make it look like there's an invasion coming here. And the ultimate insult was, you know, there was a commemoration for SS St. Louis, a ship that was full of Jews turned away. Something like 900 Jews were on that ship. they came to this country and they were turned away from every country in North America. They were sent back to Europe, and many of the people, something like 30% of them, perished in the gas chambers. And they were commemorating that occasion. In the meantime, they were demonizing the people that came by boat. You know, the Tamil people that came by boat. We have had situations where people came by boat. You had the Kamagata Maru, which had Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims on it, that came here legally, that got stopped, we got turned away, it was sent away, and ultimately we ended up apologizing for it. The fact is that there is no major problem. Very few people come to this country by boat. And for Jason Kenney to say that he's going to dry up the demand, which means that the smugglers can't make any money because nobody wants to come, is totally false. It's like the war on drugs. It doesn't work. Refugees will come if their lives are threatened. And the government has really played bad, dark politics with this issue. And they got to be really condemned for it. It's just unbelievable that they could do this to one.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
2010 than in 2009. Third, if you use a smuggler, right, we're talking on the other side now, that means that you are less likely to be a refugee in need of protection. False. Again, people fleeing persecution often are so desperate that they must turn to smugglers, and they may have no idea that what they're doing is illegal. In some cases, the smugglers themselves are not aware of the illegal nature of their activity. This bill targets victims. We repudiate it unequivocally.
Thank you.
The Liberal Party is the party of the Charter, and there is no doubt that the bill that we're discussing today absolutely violates Charter rights. As a matter of fact, the President of the Council for Refugees says, measures keeping some refugees longer in detention, denying them family reunification, and restricting their freedom of movement is likely a violation of the Canadian Charter and of international human rights obligations. This bill gives the same minister that came here to meet certain members of this organization behind closed doors sweeping powers of discretion. I ask you, does anyone in this room feel good about thinking that Jason Kenney has sweeping powers of discretion? They are not targeting the smugglers. They are targeting the refugees who come over in desperation. Canadians have been fair-minded people that have a long-standing tradition of providing asylum to bona fide refugees, and I'm sure all Canadians want to continue that. Yes, we do need to get at the smugglers, but by penalizing and restricting these desperate people who have used desperate measures to come to our shores, we are not going to stop the smugglers. It is wrong-headed and it violates the Charter.
Thank you.
I find it interesting that I was scolded by the Liberal candidate earlier for bringing up human rights. That's exactly what Bill C-49 was all about. It's about human rights. The reality is that this bill gives the minister the ability to detain for up to 1 year for no reason other than because he feels like it, people who are coming to Canada by boat. I had a look at the current Immigration Act last night. It goes from having to justify yourself, from the minister having to justify detainment every 48 hours, then to 7 days, then to 30 days, and then every 30 days for the next year, to at any point within the next 12 months, the minister can have a look and see whether the suspicion still applies. That is simply and completely a violation of our human rights. Some would say that's a violation of habeas corpus, but of course the Conservative government doesn't actually think that people coming from other countries are citizens. Well, of course they're not citizens, but doesn't want to treat them like human rights or like human beings, and so is not willing to extend habeas corpus rights to them. The NDP, as Bill has said, is entirely and completely opposed to this. There is no way, come hell or high water, that we would even consider passing a bill of this nature.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I want to really thank you for staying within your time limits, and we're moving along quite well here. So we are going to open up now Again, please direct your questions to Bill C-49, and if you want to direct it to a particular candidate, that's fine. If not, then we will ask one representative from each party to respond to your questions. So, are there questions in the audience? Yes, there's one here.
As Mr. Telegdi brought up earlier, when Jewish people came here fleeing the Holocaust, they were turned away. Many things within our history of Canada we look back on and are, this is horrible, this is racist, how could people silently sit by and allow this to happen? Currently, with the new conservative piece of legislation, Bill C-49, as was stated before, the people themselves who are fleeing desperate situations are the ones who are being penalized. People brought up Colombia earlier. Colombia has one of the highest rates of trade union disappearance, church member disappearance. People who ran an election supporting the UA have been murdered, shot, or disappeared. People fleeing from countries.
Julian, could you pose a question, please?
What is your party going to do to take a stand so when history looks back on us, they won't be like, you know, we sat by like the quiet German people and the quiet people of Eastern Europe and allowed this genocide and murder to take place? Like, what are you going to do not to be silent in the face of this genocide and these crimes against humanity?
Thank you. Andrew for the Liberals.
Okay. That is exactly the reason why the Charter has been enacted. But there is a problem with the Charter. By the time you do the Charter challenge, it will take 10 years. As you will witness, it took about 10 years or more for the security certificate to be ruled in contravention of the Charter. C-49, the party, our party, has said they'll reject it, and so have other parties. The only party that's been pushing this is Jason Kenney, and he's been trying to demonize refugees. Let me say, if Jason Kenney was here at the time of the Underground Railroad, he would have shut it down. And that's the kind of guy he is. And I mentioned before that here we have the chief recruiter of ethnics, and we're the ethnics to the Conservative Party, being in charge of multiculturalism, being in charge of citizenship and immigration. The conflict of interest is huge. No, those positions should not be put together. When I was in Parliament, I tried to separate citizenship from immigration because I saw the conflict between the two. Citizenship belongs to all Canadians. You know, it's not just a graduate immigrant, where citizenship is something that all Canadians should be embracing. And Jason Kenney is clearly trying to drive a political agenda on this, and is trying to demonize, on purpose, refugees. He calls them illegal claimants. He calls them bogus refugees. The fact is that under the law, people are refugee claimants. And if he did not slow down the process, we could deal with the refugee claimant request within 6 months.
Okay.
Because of what data, it's taking much longer.